The man who defined defiance, the legend of Malcolm X. Before the world knew him as a revolutionary, he was a prisoner. Before he was a martyr, he was a master of the spoken word. Malcolm X didn't just advocate for change, he demanded it by any means necessary. He is the ultimate symbol of radical transformation. Imagine a man who taught himself an entire language by copying a dictionary in a prison cell, only to emerge and challenge the most powerful empires on earth. He was the fire that balanced the civil rights movement, providing a voice for those who refused to turn the other cheek. His journey from a street hustler to a global human rights icon is more than just history. It's a masterclass in identity, courage, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Even decades after his voice was silenced, his legacy remains the loudest call for justice the world has ever heard. Are you ready to meet the man who refused to be silenced? Chapter 1: The Fire in the Roots and the Rise of Detroit Red. The story of Malcolm X does not begin with a podium. It begins with a fire. Born Malcolm Little in 1925, his very existence was a challenge to the status quo. His father, Earl Little, was a follower of Marcus Garvey, preaching black self-reliance, a dangerous stance that led to the family's home being burned to the ground by white supremacists, while local firemen watched in silence. By the age of 6, Malcolm's father was dead under suspicious circumstances, and his mother was eventually committed to a mental institution, shattering the family. This trauma pushed a brilliant young Malcolm toward the fringes of society. After a teacher told him that his dream of becoming a lawyer was no realistic goal for a nigger, he turned his back on the system. He moved to Boston and then New York, transforming into Detroit Red, a sharp-suited zoot-wearing hustler. He operated in the neon-lit underworld of Harlem, surviving through gambling, drug dealing, and burglary. It was a life lived at a breakneck pace, a desperate dance with the law that eventually caught up with him in 1946. Sentenced to 10 years for larceny, the world thought they had buried a common criminal. Instead, they had planted a seed. In the silence of the Norfolk prison colony, Malcolm underwent a metamorphosis that few human beings ever achieve. He realized his lack of education was a second set of bars, so he began copying the entire dictionary by hand to master the English language. He didn't just read books, he devoured the works of Herodotus, Kant, and Spinoza, all while being introduced to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, Noi. By the time he walked out of those prison gates in 1952, the hustler was gone. In his place stood a man who had replaced his slave name with a simple, defiant X. Chapter 2: The Voice of Thunder and the Mecca Epiphany. For the next 12 years, Malcolm X became the most dangerous man in America because he carried a gun, but because he carried a microphone. As the national spokesperson for the Nation of Islam, he was the architect of its massive growth, expanding the membership from 1,000 to over 30,000. While Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of a dream, Malcolm spoke of the American nightmare. He was under constant FBI surveillance, with wiretaps recording his every word, yet he remained untouchable in his conviction. However, behind the scenes, a rift was forming. Malcolm's discovery of moral failings within the NOI leadership, combined with his growing desire to be part of the broader political struggle, led to his explosive departure in 1964. This was the most pivotal year of his life. He embarked on a pilgrimage to Mecca where, for the first time, he saw Muslims of all colors, some with eyes as blue as the sky, treating him as a brother. This Hajj epiphany shattered his belief in total racial separatism. He returned as El-Hajj Malik el-Shabbas, a global statesman who sought to take the United States before the United Nations to answer for its human rights violations. He was no longer just fighting for black Americans. He was fighting for the oppressed people of the world. He met with African kings and revolutionary leaders, bridging the gap between the American South and the global South. But this new, more inclusive vision made him a target not just for the government, but for the organization he once built. He knew his time was short. He spoke of his impending death with a haunting calmness, firebombed out of his own home just a week before the end. Chapter 3: The Martyrdom and the Eternal Echo. On February 21, 1965, at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, the X became a crosshair. As Malcolm stood to speak, a stage disturbance broke out, and 3 gunmen rushed the stage, opening fire in front of his pregnant wife and children. He was struck 21 times. The man was dead, but the legend was born. Malcolm X's death did not silence his message. It amplified it until it shook the very foundations of the world. His autobiography, written with Alex Haley, became one of the most influential books of the 20th century, teaching generations how to reclaim their dignity. He provided the intellectual framework for the Black Power movement and inspired global anti-colonial struggles from South Africa to the streets of London. What makes Malcolm X so enduring is his brutal honesty and his willingness to evolve. He showed the world that a man can change his mind, his name, and his soul as long as he remains committed to the truth. Today, his influence is found in every corner of culture, from the lyrics of hip-hop icons to the slogans of modern social justice movements. He remains the ultimate symbol of the uncompromised man. While history often tries to soften revolutionaries to make them more palatable, Malcolm X refuses to be diluted. He stands as a reminder that peace without justice is merely a temporary truce. His life was a 39-year lightning strike that permanently altered the landscape of human rights, proving that one man's voice, forged in the fires of adversity and sharpened by the pursuit of knowledge, can indeed change the world forever. Let's continue with 8 mind-blowing facts about Malcolm X. 1. The Red Hustler era. Before he was a world leader, he was known as Detroit Red. He was a street-smart hustler, a professional gambler, and a burglar. His later transformation from a convict to a global icon is one of the greatest redemption stories in history. 2. A self-taught scholar behind bars. Malcolm didn't just serve time in prison, he mastered it. Frustrated by his inability to express himself in letters, he copied the entire dictionary by hand word for word to expand his vocabulary and sharpen his mind. 3. The FBI's constant shadow. Malcolm X was so influential that the FBI opened a file on him as early as 1953 at one point. He was under such heavy surveillance that his file became one of the thickest in the Bureau, labeled as a threat to national security. 4. The name X is a protest. He rejected little because he considered it a slave name given to his ancestors by white masters. The X stood for his lost African tribal name, a symbol of his unknown heritage and a defiant refusal to accept a colonial identity. 1,000 to 30,000 growth. When Malcolm joined the Nation of Islam, it was a tiny group of about 1,000 members. Through his sheer charisma and tireless organizing, he exploded their membership to over 30,000 in just a few years. 6. The Hajj Epiphany. His 1964 pilgrimage to Mecca changed everything. Seeing blonde-haired, blue-eyed Muslims treating him as a brother forced him to abandon his belief in total racial separation. He returned as El Hajj Malik el-Shabbas, a man seeking global human rights. 7. By any means necessary. This iconic phrase wasn't just a slogan, it was a philosophical stance. While many preached nonviolence, Malcolm argued that self-defense was a basic human right, making him the fire to Martin Luther King Jr.'s water. 8. He predicted his own end in the months leading up to his 1965 assassination. Malcolm spoke openly about being a marked man, despite receiving daily death threats and his house being firebombed while his family slept. He refused to stop speaking his truth until the very end. Malcolm X didn't just change his name, he changed the consciousness of a nation. He proved that no matter where you start, be it the streets or a prison cell, your voice has the power to shake the world. He remains the X in the equation of justice, the unknown factor that refuses to be ignored. Thank you for watching this chapter of human courage. If you want to keep exploring the lives of those who dared to lead, subscribe to History of Leaders 365. Whose story should we tell next? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, keep seeking the truth.